I keep hearkening back to the fact that half of the world's parents are men, and yet so often, today being an exception, men are so noticeably absent in terms of the conversations around work and family. We certainly noticed that at the Center for Work and Family, and over the past 4 years have decided to put a lot of our time and a lot of our attention into studying working dads. I guess from our research, we can say there's a sort of a good news, bad news, or bad news, good news story when we've worked and looked at fathers, mainly in Fortune 500 companies. Let me just say what some of the bad news is and where you might look and say we haven't really made much progress at all. The first is that new dads don't take time off with their children at the time of the birth of their child. In our study we did, 76% of the fathers that we studied in the Fortune 500 took a week or less off following the birth of their child, 96% took 2 weeks or less off, and 16% didn't take any time off at all following the birth of their most recent child. That obviously is really drastically insufficient in order for a man to become immersed in the great responsibility of being a father and a parent. The second thing is we found that men don't adjust their work patterns at all to accommodate parenting. In the study we did in the Fortune 500, we had 963 fathers in 4 major companies respond to our questionnaire, and exactly 1 of the 963 fathers went to part-time following the birth of his child. 1 out of 963. That's what, 0.01% or whatever. Third thing is we found that fathers don't tend to use formal flexible work arrangements. When they did it informally, but they certainly didn't raise their hand and look for the policy and ask for permission. That was the minority. Many more fathers use flexibility on an informal basis. The fourth thing is that fathers didn't adjust their career expectations. Although, as I'll say in just a minute, the fathers discussed and described their desire to be more engaged parents. When we asked the question, 76% of the fathers in the study, this was a white-collar study for the most part, 76% of the fathers in the study said, I want a job with greater responsibility than the one I currently hold, and 58%, or almost 3 out of 5, said they wanted to be in senior management in the organization they were currently employed with. That at the same time, those dads were saying, but I want to spend more time with my children. I think men have not come to the conclusion yet that those two things just don't add up. The last thing I would say is that men are not living up to the expectations of where they think they should be. When we asked the question around how do you share caregiving responsibilities with your spouse, we asked it in 2 ways. The first way we asked the question is, how do you think caregiving should be divided between you and your spouse? And the answer to that question was 70% of the fathers said 50-50. Okay? When we asked, how is caregiving divided between you and your spouse, 33% of them said 50-50. Okay? So 2 out of 3 agreed that it should be equal, but only 1 out of 3 said that was the case today. So when you look at some of those statistics and numbers, you say, has much changed, and have we really made much progress with males? In other ways, though, things have changed. And let me just give you some of the statistics that we found more impressive. The first is that the working fathers said during a work day, the average work day, they reported that they spent about 2.5 hours per day with their children. Not necessarily in caregiving activities, but with their children. 77% of the fathers said they wanted to spend more time with their children than they did currently, and 22% said about the same. Just, by the way, if you did the math, that left 1% of the fathers saying, I'd like to spend less time with my children. And we did wonder, are those the last honest men on earth? I'm not sure. So when we asked how they saw their role, 2/3 of the men in our study said, I see it as an equal balance between providing for the financial needs of my family and also providing for the emotional and physical needs of our family. When we asked what were the characteristics that made for a good dad, being a breadwinner or a financial provider came out 4th, and it was behind providing love and support, being a good mentor, role model, and coach, and being present in my child's life. And finally, when we asked the question, if your wife earned enough money financially, would you be willing to be a stay-at-home dad, or would you consider that a possibility? And we were very pleasantly surprised to see that 54% of the fathers in our study said that they would consider being a stay-at-home dad. We're not sure that they understand what that means, but what we're positive of is that there's been a change in attitude amongst men that says being a stay-at-home dad is not something to be stigmatized or something to be sneered at, and it's certainly a reasonable thing to consider. So men, I feel, are so important as parents, but obviously all of you know men are also extremely important as leaders. They may be 50% of our parents, but they are 85% of our organizational leaders, and therefore 96% of our corporate CEOs. It's certainly in the largest US companies. So I think leaving them out of the conversation is just a huge and unfortunate mistake. And the work we've done at the Center for Work and Family has tried to really bring them into the conversation, give the country a more balanced and nuanced perspective of what's going on with men these days. And our hope as we look to the future is to really be able to rally a national conversation amongst men about the new role that they need to play in order to step up and take their responsibility as 50% of the world's parents. Thank you very much.